Crawford, world language teacher, and I am so honored to welcome you to Ayah Mahmoud's senior speech. I'm very pleased to welcome Ayah's sister, Ella Odette, who is joining us from the middle school, and I also extend a welcome to Ayah's parents, who will enjoy her speech on YouTube. Will you join me in extending a warm welcome to them all? Ayah joined our community in the 11th grade. She jumped right into the Muslim Student Association looking for common ground in her new school. She dedicated herself to her academics and interned in a local attorney's office. She demonstrated quite the fashion-forward flair, that fluffy pink tote, and a keen interest in getting to know her peers, spending time socializing during break and lunch. While her transition to prep wasn't easy, she put in the work to learn as much as she could about our community. Aya's all-time favorite sport is judo, with 5 years under her belt. She found peace in the dojo, setting up mats, helping instruct classes. Her second favorite sport is soccer, playing defense. You may notice a common theme. Ayah is not afraid of confrontation. She also has a surprising passion, maybe bloodlust, for college football, the Crimson Tide in particular. She looks forward to Saturday afternoons watching Bama play and lose. At her previous school, Ayah spent time doing mock trials with Alabama Youth in Government, even writing prize-winning legislation for the competition. She represented her sophomore class in the Student Government Association. She loves to read, favoring classic literature. Her favorite book is The Kite Runner. I'm also a fan of this book and its author. I highly recommend you read any of his books. In her free time, Ayah visits family and friends in Alabama, socializes with friends from school, and binge watches Game of Thrones. She may or may not have watched the entire series 8 times through. If you'll excuse the cliche, Ayah is a force of nature. She has big thoughts, big ideas, and even bigger feelings. She's engaged, interested, quick-witted, and invested in her education, as well as making a difference in the world. Her conversation veers from football and lunchroom gossip to legislation and politics. Now, today's senior speech delves into regions of the heart and mind that can rip apart the rhythm and fabric of daily life. These are darker areas, which we all visit from time to time, some of us very briefly, others for significantly longer periods. Ayah's perspective offers guidance through these regions. Notice the word through. She doesn't want you to stay there any longer than you have to. As a side note, Ayah's speech was crafted while our projector was not working, so she was not asked to prepare a slide deck to accompany her presentation today. And now, please welcome Ayah to the stage.
I want to start by saying thank you to Ms. Crawford for the kind words and for always being there for me. I would also like to thank my parents for everything they do for me. Above all else, I want to thank my beloved family who lived in Gaza. Today, October 24th, marks exactly 1 year since they passed away. They were highly significant in my life despite all the distance. I love them beyond words, and I wanted to dedicate this speech to them. I want to talk about something we all or will all experience, but don't really discuss in full honesty, and that is grief. This is something essential to the human experience. Typically, when someone hears the word grief, they think about the feelings associated with the loss of a loved one, defined as bereavement by Mayo Clinic. But we can experience grief through any changes that happen in our life, like selling a home, ending a friendship, retiring, and probably most relatable for my grade, leaving these 4 years behind at graduation. I want to zone in on the heavy emotions people feel after any life-changing event. Many of us are familiar with the 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and then acceptance. They're not neat little boxes we move through one by one. Sometimes they overlap or return when we least expect it, And if we're unfamiliar with how to navigate through the emotions that come with this process, unfortunately, that leaves a lot of room for unhealthy coping mechanisms to come into play. A Cleveland Clinic study found the most common stage where people tend to indulge in harmful behaviors is the anger and depressive stages. In these stages, people dealing with grief, they're not just sad or angry, they are grappling with something that shakes the foundations of who they are as a person. And when the weight of grief becomes too much, that's when we may numb the pain with distractions. Whether that's through substance abuse, unhealthy relationships, or shutting out the world completely, we may stop caring for ourselves. We may lose interest in the things we once loved, or avoid the people we once needed. This is where grief can transform into something destructive if we aren't careful. I've watched people around me, and even myself, slip into unhealthy patterns, all because we didn't know how to cope with the weight of what we were dealing with. Everyone experiences grief very differently, especially with all the different kinds of things you can grieve. My personal experience was a bit unorthodox. I kind of skipped the denial stage. I processed what happened immediately, and I processed it fully. I remember when I found out, I didn't even cry much. Any sadness I had was buried deep down under the immense amount of anger that I felt. I was angry at first, and I stayed angry for months. And sometimes I still am. The rage and resentment I felt wasn't just the cliche, I'm angry at the world. There was also a lot of anger towards my family. I was angry at all the time that was lost, and all the future memories that will never happen. It was an irrational anger, but it was just because I missed them so much. During the bargaining stage of grief, according to the American Psychiatric Press, a person attempts to negotiate or make compromises. We try to make agreements with ourselves or deal with a higher power in exchange for feeling less sad or having a different outcome. Bargaining is also often very irrational. However, as a religious person, my bargaining stage was a lot of prayer. I prayed to God, and I prayed a lot. I prayed and wished that they were okay and found some sense of peace. This was a reliable comfort I gave myself, and it helped me in those times of unbearable anger. And when it was late at night and there were no more distractions, this is when I would feel my worst. The depressive stage is constant and it's overwhelming. And as silly as it sounds now, I would have done anything to numb the pain that would sometimes peek through. So I created my own distractions. I made a lot of mistakes and a lot of bad choices so I wouldn't have the time to be sad. And if I wasn't sad, I was angry, and then the whole cycle would repeat. Now, the last stage is acceptance, but that doesn't mean that a person is fully healed or done feeling any of their emotions. It also doesn't mean accepting what has happened. It means realizing and coming to terms with the fact that the emotions of grief are your companions now. All the good, bad, and ugly emotions will stick with you forever, and accepting and acknowledging that makes the whole process a lot easier. I haven't fully gotten to this point yet, honestly, but I am more equipped to handle my emotions better than this time last year. And I like to believe I was lucky, because I had a support system in every corner that I turned, which helped me navigate the very trying time. It was also 100% why I didn't make mistakes with high cost or of high magnitude, but that isn't the case for everyone. Which leads me to what I really want to talk about today. How can a person avoid falling down a rabbit hole? How can they face grief head on and avoid the potential slippery slope? So the first thing that we have to do is acknowledge our pain. It sounds easy enough, but it's not. Denying the hurt doesn't make it go away, it just festers, and then it turns into something a lot harder to face later on. Crying, talking to someone, or even sitting with your emotions is 100% necessary. Grief is a process, it's not a weakness, and it's really important to remember that. One of the hardest lessons that I've personally had to learn is that it's okay to not be okay. We often judge ourselves for not getting over it quickly enough, whatever the situation may be. But grief has no timeline. Some days will feel easier, and others will feel impossible. But it's important to not beat ourselves up for feeling how we feel. Grief is not linear, it comes in waves. Sometimes they're gentle, but other times they can completely crash over you. What's important is that you keep swimming. Second, which is typically more associated with the heavier losses, but it's giving yourself permission to heal. We often resist the idea of moving forward because we think it means forgetting what or who we've lost. But healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning to live with loss in a healthier way. It means carrying that loss with you, but in a way that doesn't weigh you down. And last but not least is finding healthy outlets. This could be anything you truly find joy in doing. Mental Health of America suggests some things, and this is journaling, art, going for long walks, or simply talking through your feelings with someone that you trust. The National Library of Medicine says that exercise, for example, is scientifically proven to help boost your mood, even when you don't feel like moving at all. Finding a creative or physical outlet can stop grief from becoming an all-consuming black hole and makes you a lot less susceptible to turning to harmful behaviors. Now, I won't lie to you, this time last year, if someone told me to just go on a walk so I could feel better, I would have thrown hands. So I wanted to share realistic little things I did that helped me tremendously. I rewatched my favorite shows a scary number of times. Watching other people's problems and emotions on screen was sort of a healthier way to cope with the fact that I wasn't dealing with my own. The second is finding refuge with your favorite people. If you've experienced grief before, you know how hard this can be, especially because of the disconnect you may feel from people who aren't dealing with the same things that you are. But it is very, very important. With all my anger and all my sadness, I still made time for good experiences with my people. And at the end of the night, I had a genuine smile on my face. Another healthy distraction is schoolwork, which there's no shortage of here. This one is completely dependent on what your beliefs are, but I found refuge in God and religion. Just that faith and the positive feelings that come with it helped me be at peace during the hard times. Now lastly is music, and this is the most overlooked tool in my opinion. We all revel in music during any and all moments of our lives. It shouldn't be any different when we're sad. So I want to share some lyrics from a song. It's called In the Stars by Benson Boone. It's pretty popular. And it was on repeat for quite some time last year. I'm still holding on to everything that's dead and gone. I don't want to say goodbye, because this one means forever. And now you're in the stars, and 6 feet's never felt so far. Digging through your old birthday letters, a crumbled 20 is still in the box. I don't think I could ever find a way to spend it, even if it's the last 20 that I've got. Now, this was a B song for me last year, especially because I related to it so closely. And I want to share the story that it does relate to. I like to go grocery shopping while I'm on the phone, and I was on the phone with my uncle at Publix one time, and he convinced me to buy his favorite flavor of ice cream. I bought it, I put it in the freezer, and I forgot all about it. But that was the last time that we spoke. And when I got the news that he passed away, I came home, I ate the whole pint, and now this container sits in my room. It's going to college with me too. I just like to look at it when I'm sad. It helps. These little things like this, they really do help, more than I could put it into words. It can make it easier for your brain to process what's going on in a healthy way. These little things also ground you and remind you of who you were before your loss. I'm not here to tell you that grief goes away completely, because it doesn't, but I am here to tell you that you have the power to decide how you cope with it. You can choose to lean into self-destructive patterns, or you can choose to confront your grief in ways that honor your pain, but also honors yourself. What we fail to realize in those moments is that grief, when it's left unchecked, doesn't just take away what we've lost, it begins to take us away too. During the stages of my grief, I obviously wasn't myself, not in the slightest. But I wasn't lost completely. And with time and energy, if you find yourself unrecognizable as well, think back to those special moments, like the ice cream. They are more powerful than you may think. Now, I know grief fairly well, and I know loss. Everyone in this room will too. It's unfortunate, but it's just the way that the world works. Loss changes you, but your choices determine if you change for the better or the worse. My advice is to get help if you're struggling. It's hard, but there's no shame in it at all. Reach out, because it really does take a village. I couldn't be more grateful for mine. If there's anything from my speech that I want you all to remember, is that losing yourself to grief is the most devastating loss of all. Once you lose yourself, you're not just grieving who or what you've lost, you're also grieving you. Thank you.